So this week I already created new project and I named it week 5. Of course, last week was President's Day Monday and we simply did not have a class, so but I would like to stay on par with other courses. So technically for us this is the 4th week, but here I numbered week 5. So it's not a mistake, it's just basically staying with the rest of the schedule. So the latest posting here reads that we're going to address new topics and discuss errors, but there are some leftovers from last week's discussion, and the discussion was related to the prior week. Let me just go back to week 4. So there are some leftover topics, in particular in our lecture notes here. If you see, we still have to discuss functions and vectors, possibly also talk a little bit about strings. So the idea, so let's get started. Like I said, already created a new project and I added the main file to it. So the file is currently empty. So let's try to make a few experiments here with vectors. So first I'll say include vector, and the vector is the header file that brings in the vector object. Vector object is a sequence of elements. Okay, we will also be printing something, so we will also include the IOStream for what we do, and we'll just start experimenting. So int main. So this is our main function, and typically I say return 0, which indicates successful result. And since we started the discussion about loops last week, let's try to experiment with the loop. And I'll say while std get line sin std string. Let's try to bring back the strings. So another header file would be a string here. So this loop that I'm creating is let's just declare a string. I'll call it input. Right, so we're going to get input into the string, and inside the loop we just originally echo it back. You entered and we'll echo back whatever the user is typing in. Right, very simple loop. Another thing I want to add. Please enter some strings. Right, so we're going to prompt the user or blank to exit. So here we can say if input is empty, like this, we break from this loop So let's test this program, and then we'll discuss, the content here. Right, just a little program that's supposed to input strings and echo them back. Build. Hopefully everything looks okay. Oh. Get line, misspelling. Right, try again. And run this program. Let me just adjust. So blank to exit. So 1, 2, 3. And blank to exit. So the program basically works as expected. So let's talk about some of the elements in this little sample. So we have an input string, which is a dynamic string. Dynamic strings can grow dynamically, can shrink dynamically, can be searched, can be replaced, the fragments of it can be replaced, individual characters can be manipulated. So this is very flexible object that provides placeholder for plain text. Of course, we're all familiar with output, and I remind you that getLine, which comes with the string header file, allows us to enter entire lines of text, including white space. And as soon as the user types enter, then the input stream allows us to get our input, and our string named input gets populated with whatever they type on the on the keyboard. At the same time, I check if input equals blank string. Notice a double equal sign. This is a test for equality. Definitely not a single equal sign, but two, and this is check for equality. And break takes me out of this loop. So this loop that I have, right? So it starts on this line and ends over here. So this is like the ending of my loop right here. And if everything goes well, I just simply echo back the input that was typed in by the user. Okay, so very simple program. So notice that this here, this section here, if you watch it closely, is used as a condition for our loop. So what's happening here? If I attempt to create this type of input, so first the program is expected to type this prompt, right? And if I enter 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? This will be my input, and it's supposed to say you entered 1, 2, 3. Like this. And it's going to go back to wait for another input. But if I press Control Z on my keyboard, or Control Y actually, if this was a Unix system, like Unix-like system like Linux, this input stream is closed by the request of the user. So let's give it a try. Right, so I try to run this program again, and I say 1, 2, 3. It works as expected, and then I press Control Z, and I hit Enter. You can see that program is ending. So this is expected behavior. Basically, this getLine is a system function which allows this input stream to populate this string. But if I type Control Z, this is a request by the user to close the input stream. And the closing input string essentially indicates that the program should no longer expect anything from this stream of stream device. In my case, it's my keyboard. Basically, intentionally close this keyboard input device and do not expect anything from it. So therefore, getLine, actually what it returns back, this call, an attempt to generate input, it returns back true if everything is okay and input was populated with information, or false if the stream decided not to give me any input. So Control Z is a signal to character input stream over here, right? And as a result, getLine is signaled by this character input stream, and it returns false. And if I press Control Z, this while loop terminates. So it is advisable when we're dealing with inputs. I'll give you another example. Let me duplicate this line and actually make it a little bit different, right? So this was the original version, and now I simply replace it by using input operator into this input like this. So let's run this again. So now I still say please enter some strings or blank to exit. Actually, I probably want to keep it on the new line like this, and I run it again to test it, right? So this time notice that we have changed it to enter individual tokens. So any white space will terminate the input, allow the input to be processed, and come back to the prompt. So let's just type some strings, 1, 2, 3, like this, and again Control Z, right? So which is intentional closing, and hit enter. Intentionally close the input stream. You see that this loop very gracefully terminates here. So instead of using a statement like this somewhere inside the loop, it is advisable, right? So here I could say while true, right? Like forever. It is advisable to keep our input somewhere in a condition. For instance, right here, it would be better if I said if this input succeeds, which is simply wrapping this input as a condition inside my if statement, right? So if say if this input succeeds, then do all of this, right? Like this, I can say, okay, do all of this. Otherwise, we need to break. Right, we need to stop. And we may even signal the user that input stream was closed. Goodbye, right? Something like this, so that we have some control over it. But again, in a situation with the loop, I would not really recommend doing it. If possible, it's best to keep this directly as a condition, essentially as a condition that controls the loop. And so this way, we don't have to worry about the additional if-else statements and so forth, right? But like I said, in general, consider keeping an eye on this input, and sometimes there could be input related problems. So for instance, somebody unplugs the keyboard and you try to get input from it. So obviously it's very possible to get all sorts of errors from the input device. So it's just advisable to keep those types of inputs checked as a condition, because they return the result true or false, and this can be, we can take advantage of it. It's just a good advice to organize it like this.